I remember that we all were in a huddle, and Jerry talked about how we were all going to be the rest of our lives.
Julia Louis-Dreyfus, renowned for playing Elaine Benes on Seinfeld, has finally spoken about her relationship with Jerry Seinfeld.
Jerry's connected to us, and he was weeping, but I didn't understand the profundity of it, to tell you the truth.
And it's not what fans expected. For years, rumors and speculations surrounded the set of Seinfeld.
And what's the deal with lampshades? Yeah. I mean, if it's a lamp, why do you want shade?
But now, at 64, Julia is revealing shocking revelations and untold truths that changes everything you thought you knew about one of TV's most iconic shows.
This is violent, psychotic behavior directed at me, all because I told her to swing her arms.
To millions of viewers, Jerry Seinfeld and Julia Louis-Dreyfus were television gold. Their timing was flawless, and their chemistry felt so real that people swore they had to be close in real life. But fans never saw what happened when the cameras stopped rolling. Most people don't even know this, but when Seinfeld was first being pitched, there was no Elaine Benes. Julia's character came later, added after network executives insisted the show needed a female presence. Julia was still climbing the ladder in Hollywood, fighting to be seen as more than just another pretty face on a male-dominated set. But when she landed the role, everything changed. Audiences loved her. The media called her the breakout star. And Jerry? He was still the face of the show, but that sudden shift in attention created cracks that only got bigger as the show exploded. From the outside, Jerry Seinfeld looked unstoppable. He wasn't just the lead actor, he was the powerhouse that controlled nearly every part of the show. To fans, it seemed like Jerry had built the perfect comedy empire and his castmates were just along for the ride. But behind those studio walls, the reality was far more complicated. Julia may have played one of the most iconic female characters in TV history, but off camera, she was constantly working to prove her worth. It wasn't enough to deliver the jokes or land the scenes, she had to battle for respect. But that was only the beginning. The truth is, Julia wasn't just showing up to tell jokes, she was stepping into a daily chaos. It's easy to forget now, with all the reruns and awards, but in the early days of Seinfeld, her place on that set was far from guaranteed. From the start, the odds were stacked against her. The show had already been shaped by Jerry Seinfeld and Larry David, two friends with a clear vision for their quirky, male-driven sitcom. Jason Alexander had his George Costanza persona locked in. Michael Richards, unpredictable as ever, was carving out his spot as Kramer. But Julia? She was still the outsider. What most people never realized was how different things felt behind the scenes. On screen, Elaine Benes was sharp, fearless, and always ready with a comeback. But behind the camera, Julia was navigating a set where creative control belonged to the men. Jerry wasn't just the star, he was the face of the show. The network adored him, and that kind of influence came with power, and Jerry held on to it tightly. Julia quickly learned that pushing for more input wasn't always welcome. The Seinfeld set wasn't exactly built on warm, family-like energy. It was competitive and with high pressure. Every episode had to be perfectly, and with Jerry in control, there was little room for mistakes. Julia played along, keeping her frustrations quiet, but the tension simmered just beneath the surface. The public only the hilarious storylines and the chemistry that seemed effortless. But behind those laughs, Julia was working twice as hard to prove herself. And as Seinfeld exploded into a global hit, Julia's presence became impossible to ignore. But despite the success, the unspoken power struggle never really disappeared, and neither did the emotional toll it left behind. By the time Seinfeld became a global phenomenon, Jerry Seinfeld was no longer just the star, he was the symbol of the show's success. But with all that fame came something else, a level of control that few people dared to challenge. Julia may have been delivering some of the sharpest, funniest moments on Seinfeld, but that didn't always translate to equal treatment behind the scenes. Jerry's influence reached every corner of the production. His word was the one that mattered most, and when someone pushed back, it didn't always end well. As Seinfeld climbed the charts, with every season bringing higher ratings and more media attention, the weight of that dynamic only grew heavier. Julia's role as Elaine Benes became iconic, but with each success came a quiet reminder. The show still revolved around Jerry. Even when Julia's scenes carried entire episodes, it wasn't enough to shift the balance of power. The tension never exploded into public feuds, but the cracks were always there. Julia was building her legacy, but she was doing doing it under the constant pressure of working beside a man whose reputation made him untouchable. And as her success grew, so did the quiet power struggle between them. But Julia wasn't done fighting for her place. And the moment she finally revealed what working under Jerry's shadow really felt like, that changed everything. But Julia played her role, both on screen and off. She became a fan favorite, critics praised her performance, and Elaine Benes turned into one of the most iconic female characters in television history. Yet behind those sharp comebacks and bold one-liners was a woman carrying real frustration. For decades, she stayed quiet. She never publicly criticized Jerry. She never hinted at the unspoken tension that defined their working relationship. She told herself it was the right thing to do. The show meant too much to people. It gave audiences comfort, laughter, and an escape from the real world. Julia wasn't going to be the one to pull back the curtain. But everything changes with time. By the time Julia turned 64, her career had evolved far beyond Seinfeld. She had won Emmys, starred in hit shows like Veep, and became one of the most respected actresses in Hollywood. She no longer needed to protect anyone's legacy, and slowly, she began confessing the truth. In interviews, Julia talked about how isolating it felt to be the only woman in the main cast, how exhausting it was to constantly prove her value, how working under Jerry's creative control came with pressures no one outside the set could understand. When Julia finally let the truth slip, it wasn't some explosive moment. It was quiet and controlled. Julia finally stopped sugarcoating her experience. She admitted that while Seinfeld made her a household name, the behind-the-scenes reality wasn't nearly as perfect as the show made it seem. She talked about the power imbalance, how Jerry Seinfeld held control over everything, and how, as the only major woman in the cast, her voice often came last, if it came at all. Julia made it clear that she respected Jerry's talent, but respect didn't erase the frustration or the exhaustion of working in his shadow for nearly a decade. What fans saw on screen was real, but what they didn't know was how much of that energy came from actual tension. Julia explained that the sharp comebacks, the sarcastic exchanges, even the chemistry that made Elaine and Jerry so iconic were fueled by the same unspoken friction happening off-camera. There were days when she felt invisible, and while the cameras rolled and audiences laughed, Julia was carrying the weight of trying to hold her ground. Her words didn't come from bitterness. They came from experience, from surviving in an industry where speaking up could cost you everything, especially as a woman. For years, Julia protected the show's legacy. She smiled in interviews, praised Jerry, and played her part to perfection. But time changes everything. People began to see the cracks, the emotional weight behind Julia's performance. Suddenly, Seinfeld wasn't just a quirky, flawless comedy. It was also a story of real tension, hidden frustration, and one woman's fight to be seen. And even after all those years, Julia's story wasn't done yet. Even after all the success, all the awards, and all the years that passed, the story of Julia and Jerry Seinfeld never really ended. And when Julia finally spoke her truth, it wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming her place in the legacy they built together. Julia made it clear that Seinfeld changed her life. It opened doors. It made her famous. But it also came with a hidden cost: the emotional weight of working under someone else's shadow, the constant fight to be respected, and the quiet exhaustion of pretending everything behind the scenes was perfect. Jerry Seinfeld will always be remembered as the mastermind behind the show. His timing, his jokes, his influence helped shape television history. But thanks to Julia, fans now know the full picture. Her honesty showed people that even the most iconic shows come with flaws, that the laughs, the chemistry, and the success don't always reflect the reality happening behind the scenes. Julia's story is proof that being strong, talented, and essential isn't always enough in an industry built on ego and power. Sometimes it takes decades to finally say what you've been holding in. And when Julia finally did, she didn't tear down Seinfeld. She added depth to it. She reminded the world that behind every great show are real people carrying unseen struggles, that the laughs they delivered came with late nights, quiet tension, and sacrifices no one ever saw. And with that, she left fans with a legacy that's more real and more inspiring than anyone ever expected. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you liked the video, don't forget to like and subscribe for further updates, and click the next video on screen now for another interesting story.